Alright, so I'm going to do a little talk about biodiversity and conservation and possibly utilizing legislation, as has been done in the West, to stop the sale of invasive plants in big box stores, in local stores, etc. So I wrote some legislation for Tennessee to stop the sale, either at the county level, the city level, or the state level, and I couldn't get any traction. I'm not the most charismatic person, and I'm not very well connected. So if you're well connected and you have charisma, then you maybe could use that double dose to, and I'm happy to share the draft legislation that I basically stitched together from what other people have done to get some legislation written to stop the sale of plants that are invasive. And why should you care? If you love vinca and you love English ivy and you love honeysuckle and you love autumn olive, then maybe you don't want those plants stopped from being sold or made available. Here's why I think you should care, and there's a lot of support for caring in the community, the gardening community, the horticultural community, and definitely in the conservation science community. Because if we reduce genetic diversity, flashback or visit one of the earlier videos that I made on genetic diversity. If we reduce genetic diversity in the plants, we have a footprint all the way through the rest of the community. When I'm talking about community, I'm talking about all the insects that feed on those plants, all the birds that feed on those insects, or the bats that feed on those plants, that pollinate those plants, etc. So it goes through the entire system. When you reduce genetic diversity at the plant level, you are reducing genetic diversity higher up. Why does genetic diversity matter? Increased diversity of species, in addition to increased diversity within populations of organisms, leads to the increased probability, so it's just probability alone, of having immunity to a novel disease, a new disease. That's kind of a timely thing to be talking about, right? So if you have more genetic diversity, it's like having more colors of jelly beans in a jar. If you have a jar that's full of just white, blue, and green jelly beans, then that's your immune system. That's all that you can select from to respond to a novel disease. But if you have a jar, same number of jelly beans, but there's a rainbow color of beans, then you have all that possibility for just one of those colors to work effectively against this new disease. And all you need is that one color to help out the entire system and make it more stable. I'm not sure I described that well, but I can try again later. So as I'm driving along through this beautiful countryside, I see it dominated by honeysuckle, probably 15 species that are non-native, that have been introduced and outcompete the couple of native species that we have. I see Bradford pear, which is it's the only tree that I dislike. I think it's a vile tree. It's weak wooded. It's that early blooming white tree. The tree fills out. It's very stinky. It produces weak wood because it was cultivated to produce a bloom early and grow very, very fast. Anytime you have wood growing fast, you're getting weak wood. So these trees break apart readily, and they're a hazard. So I'm not very fond of them. And the birds spread the seed, and they end up dominating the countryside. And so what are we missing with that? What are we missing when the vinca and the English ivy is dominating Imes Nature Trail in Tennessee, or any nature trail, any Rails to Trails area, or any other like native forest habitat, or even maybe out in the Smokies or in the Cumberland Plateau? You might see vinca, heavenly bamboo, or ivy. Definitely you're going to encounter the euonymus and the honeysuckle. And certainly along the roadways, that's what I'm seeing dominating the roadways. So what loses as a result of that? What loses are your native dogwoods, redbuds, the different cherry trees, and then let's just try to start on the understory. Spice bush, one of my favorites. Maple leaf viburnum loses out, your Dutchman's breeches, your trillium, your May apple. If you lose out on your May apple, then you're losing out potentially on morels, right? Because that's can be an abundance of May apples can indicate a good place to be harvesting morels. So you're losing your fungal diversity as well. So I think that's why people should care, is because you're losing plant diversity, the plants that people often consider, especially if you're talking to your grandparents, these are the plants of their youth, and they're going away. They're going by the wayside because these invasive plants are weedy and very successful at growing faster and taking up the nutrients quicker. Kudzu, for example, growing 4 inches like in a day, that's crazy. So the only way to combat these that are still being sold, I think, is to get out the word. 1, please stop buying them. 2, get them out of your yards, or at least contain them within your yard. Before they start to set fruit, cut them way back. Don't let them set fruit. 3, start planting more of the natives, and there are a lot of organizations, like there's the Native Plant Rescue Squad in Tennessee, where they go and they get natives, they rescue them from development areas, and then you can go there and get these beautiful, amazing trees and shrubs and understory for next to nothing. Find an organization or a nursery that does that. They're all over the country. And then 4, this would be a great time to get involved in writing legislation. So I've tried to tape this video so many times I can't remember if I already said this. I wrote some legislation that was basically cobbling together what's already been written for control at the county and state level in the Southwest. And I started a draft and then tried to get some headway in Tennessee, which I'm not very well connected and I'm not particularly charismatic, so I didn't make any headway. But I do have a draft, and I'm happy to share that with anyone. So if you want something to sort of get you going, and you are charismatic or well connected, and you think you can maybe get this legislation off the ground, and you need something positive to focus your brain on during this crazy, anxiety-inducing, frustrating, fearful time, then contact me. I have that, and I'd be happy to help any way that I can. And also gardening. I think gardening, as long as you're staying 6 feet away from anybody else, seems like a great time to get out into your yard and learn what's there and connect with nature a little bit.